Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all.
Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my channel where I review fantasy, Stephen King, all sorts of books, and today I'm going to be talking about Fractal Noise from Christopher Paolini. This book came out earlier this year, and when I heard about it, I literally ran out the day it came out and bought it because not only am I a huge Christopher Paolini fan, some of you may remember him from the Aragon series, but I also read his last book, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, back in 2020, and I absolutely loved that book. It was one of my favorite books of that year. So when I heard that this book was taking place in the same universe, a fractal universe, this book is called, I was super excited. So I am going to break down world building, characters, and plot, but right off the bat, do you need to read To Sleep in a Sea of Stars before this one? No, absolutely not. Even though this book claims to take place in the same universe, and it does, you can tell, this book takes place in space, and To Sleep in a Sea of Stars takes place in space. That's kind of where the similarities end. In the very beginning, there are some references to planets that were mentioned in that book. However, that's about it, and that's where the similarities end. And honestly, knowing that doesn't really add anything to this story, so you absolutely can start with this one first. Honestly, I would almost recommend starting with this one first because this book is much shorter, and To Sleep in a Sea of Stars is 800 plus pages. So if you want to get a sense of what Christopher Paolini's writing is like now compared to the Aragon series, I would actually recommend starting off with this one. So the premise of this book is pretty simple. We have a crew on a spaceship out in space, and they come across this mysterious planet. And on this planet, they can see that there is this hole, but this hole is so symmetrical and exact that there's no way that it's something other than quote unquote made. I want to say man-made, but let's just say made, and there's this noise coming from it. So they make a decision to go down and investigate this hole, and that's pretty much all you need to know going into this. So let's start with the world building. Like I mentioned, this book takes place in space, and then the majority of this book takes place on a forbidden, abandoned planet. It's a small group of people in this one location. Christopher Paolini does a really good job bringing this world to life. This crew spends most of the book on their own, on this planet, all alone, in the middle of deep space, investigating something that they're not sure about. And I think that he really does a good job, bringing that to life and making you feel what the crew is feeling. This sense of, just being completely alone and isolated and cut off from everything that you know and love. So from a world building perspective, this book definitely does world building very, very well. There's also a lot of technical terminology in here, and I am not intelligent enough to know how much of that stuff is accurate. So for example, when the crew members are talking about the space suits that they're wearing or the equipment that they're bringing with them and how they are investigating this hole, it sounds like that could be true, but I don't know. Maybe if you're super into science and astrophysics, maybe you would know if that was wrong or right, but I didn't know, and I feel like the average reader wouldn't know. So to me, I feel like that added to the story, not take away from it. So I'm assuming most people would feel the same, but again, feel free to disagree with me if you think differently. So now let's talk about the characters. Even though there is a crew, our main character, the character that the story kind of revolves around, his name is Alex. And this is a similarity between the main character To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, but both of the main characters in this book and that book have suffered a personal tragedy that they're dealing with. Without giving it away, Alex has suffered a personal tragedy, and since then, he's been out in space with this crew. And when the crew is first deciding whether or not they want to go investigate this hole, Alex is very reluctant. He doesn't want to do this. But of course, there wouldn't be a story if he didn't, so at the end of the day, he does go along. And throughout his journey, and I'll get I'll talk about this a little bit more in the plot section, but through his journey, we got a lot of flashbacks into what his life was like before, how he got to this moment, the tragedy that he suffered, how he's been dealing with it, but really not dealing with it, you know, those type of things. And again, Alex's tragedy and what he's struggling with, like internally, I think is very important to the story, because we have a crew that is like physically struggling on this abandoned planet trying to find out an answer, and he has this internal struggle going on at the same time. And it's interesting to see how those two things run in parallel to each other, and I think that adds a lot to the story. Now, the rest of the crew is filled out by various characters, and each character, you know, kind of serves a purpose. Like, one knows machines really well, one knows, you know, science really well, you know, like that type of thing. And the thing I like about this book is that in a lot of these situations where you have a group of people that don't necessarily like each other, but they get along, and then they're put in this very extreme situation, it's like, okay, the team has to come together to save the day, to complete their goal. However, this book is very unexpected, and what you think is going to happen is not what happens. And I don't want to give anything away here, but let's just say that this book takes a lot of common tropes, common book tropes, and just story tropes in general, and totally turns them on its head. Totally turns them on its head. Not only that, but there's a lot of talk in this book about religion, surprisingly. One of the members of the crew is like very religious and very much believes in like a higher power and everything for a purpose, and et cetera, et cetera. And one of the other members of the crew is like the total opposite, like think anarchist, doesn't believe in anything, et cetera, et cetera. And these two butt heads a lot during the course of the story, and Alex finds himself in the middle. This is another area that I think Paolini does really well establishing these characters, these unique characters. Again, this book is not really that long when you think about it, so he does a really good job, like, introducing you to these characters and getting you to know them in a very short amount of time. And again, expect the unexpected. That's going to bring me to the plot. Again, this book is only about 250 pages, so the plot moves very fast. And the thing that this book does really well is build tension. From the time that the crew lands until the end of the book, the tension just builds and builds and builds. The tension of exploring this black abyss of a hole, the tension of these crew members struggling with their internal struggles, the tension of being in this environment that's basically trying to kill them at every turn. Like, the tension building is just done so well. And one of the things that I think is unique about this book, without giving anything away, is that one of the reasons they decide to explore this hole is because there is a noise coming from it, a sound. And in the beginning of this book, this sound is depicted as a thud. And throughout the book, you will see that there are these little thuds in this tiny font here, kind of randomly in this chapter. However, as the book starts to go along, you can see right here, the thuds start to get bigger and they start to get louder. And again, as the tension builds and you get towards the end of the book, these thuds start to grow and become start to happen more often. And I think that was a really cool way to, like, it kind of bleeds into the world building in a way as well. Like, it really helps to create this atmosphere of, like, what the hell is going on? Like, what is going on? So for the most part, I think, again, the plot of this book is super exciting. However, my one issue with this book is the ending. It is the ending. And I should have expected the unexpected by the time I got to the end. I should have. So part of the problem might be me. It's me. I'm the problem. But I just felt like with all this tension building, with all this craziness, with all this stuff going on, that it was really going to lead up to this, like, epic ending, just epic ending. But there's not an epic ending. There's not. And on one hand, I do respect the book for the way that it ended. I respect that it took the unexpected route, and I respect that it kind of, again, turned the trope on its head and did what it did. However, it's just not what I personally wanted. So I respect it. I understand it. It's just not what I personally wanted. So just to wrap this up, I really, really, really like this book, except for the ending. It has awesome world building, fantastic characters, and a super fun plot where you should expect the unexpected. And if you want to get a taste for Christopher Paolini's writing, I would recommend reading this first and then To Sleep in a Sea of Stars if you like this one. Again, the only thing I did not like was that ending, but I still respect it. So that is it for me today, and Roscoe, who wanted to say hello, thank you, Roscoe. Roscoe's a big fan too. So now I want to know from you, have you read Fractal Noise? Have you read To Sleep in a Sea of Stars? Have you read the Aragon series? Let me know in the comments section below, and as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more bookish stuff and more furry friends coming your way soon. All right, everyone, happy reading.